Hi, and thanks for joining me here for another episode of Story Time. Today's story, the excerpt is from my book, Traveling Left of Center and Other Stories, and it's called The Healer. Just let me touch you, please. Just one touch. The tip of my finger, then. Please, can I touch you with the tip of my finger? Please. Just for a second, please. Begging, pleading, the voice of desperation. Cassie had heard it so many times before, and in the beginning, in the early days, had found it impossible to ignore. So she would stand there, let them touch her, stroke her face, cut tiny pieces of faded cloth from her shirt, her jeans. Once, even a strand of hair from her head done so quickly that she couldn't shield her scalp from the sharp blade of the scissors. And with each touch, she felt more of herself being taken, being lost. But today she turned a deaf ear to the words, hardened her heart to the emotion behind the plea. She had to. Otherwise, there would be nothing of her left at the end of the day. She would be in a million separate pieces, scattered to the four corners of the world. A disembodied force, forever longing for a body into which it could once again reside. Cassie was a healer. At least, that was what the people who touched her said. She never touched anyone, though. She just stood there while they approached, hardly daring to breathe for fear they would find a way to take away even the breath from her body. Then, with one or two trembling fingers, these people, these needy, needy people, would tentatively reach out and lightly caress the sleeve of her jacket, the back of her neck, her forehead where every day new wrinkles scarred their way across the thin skin. Every time they touched her, Cassie would shiver, as though molecule by molecule, life-giving heat was being drained from her. But then it passed, and it always passed. And she would be warm again, maybe not as warm as she would like to be, but then, as her granny always reminded her when she complained of the cold, drained feeling that followed a touching, you have a gift, but a gift comes with a cost. That's just the way it is, Cassandra, and you'd better get used to it. She ought to be used to it by now. People had been touching her for 20 years, since she was just a child of 8. The first time she had done a healing, the first time, in fact, that she knew she possessed such a strange power. A woman had handed her a cat, a dirty white mass of fleas and fur and bones, begging her, please fix it. She won't eat or drink. And my kids are beside themselves. They can't die. She can't die. The mother looked as half-starved as the animal, her eyes wild with misery, pain, and fear. Cassie didn't know what to do. She had never done a healing before, although often enough she had watched her grandmother work her touch on the old, infirm, damaged dregs of humanity who would cross the threshold of their secluded farmhouse. She never understood how those strangers had found her grandmother. The two of them lived far from town, down a rutted dirt road that was muddy in the spring, hard and rocky in the summer, and dangerously icy when winter whistled its way through the mountain. But find her they did, and now they were finding Cassie as well, hoping against hope that the gift had passed from grandparent to grandchild, the gift that couldn't save her mother who had died giving Cassie life. Cassie used to wonder if she was not in some way responsible for her mother's death. Had she greedily inhaled her mother's breath into her own fragile lungs? Had her birth drained her mother of life? Or was she her mother's final healing? By taking the gift from her mother into her tiny body, had Cassie freed her mother from the draining existence that her life had become. So that is an excerpt from my short story, The Healer, from Traveling Left of Center and Other Stories. Where the story originated from, it's kind of an odd thing. Years ago, I had a friend who practiced Reiki, and periodically I would go to her for a Reiki treatment. For some reason, Reiki worked really well on me. I mean, I could really tell the difference after a feeling or after a Reiki treatment. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was always a good thing. But of course, being a writer, I thought about Reiki and what it must be like to be the Reiki practitioner. You know, take it not from the standpoint of being a person who was receiving a Reiki treatment, but rather being the person who was giving it. And I remember asking her one time, how do you feel after you've done a treatment with somebody? How do you feel? Are you weakened? Are you tired? If it's somebody that is a particularly difficult case or someone with a lot of problems, does it affect you in some fashion? And she said it never did, but that was kind of what sparked the idea of a healer, of somebody who had the ability to do a healing, who was able to somehow fix what was wrong with other people, whatever their physical ailment was. All they had to do was touch her, and they would be healed. But I thought, okay, if that's the case, they must be taking something from her. And the fact that she was always drained afterwards kind of led me in that direction. And I thought about it too from the standpoint that it started when she was a child. What must it be like to be that kind of a person, to be able to do that, to have people come to you to take away from you? And that became the genesis of the story, The Healer, and how Cassie deals with this gift, the gift that she didn't want, the gift that her mother never wanted. What would happen to her? Would she spend the rest of her life as a healer? How would this work? What kind of a life could you have if the only contact you have with people is when they come to you for something? Never giving, always taking. So that is where the story The Healer comes from. And as with so many of my short stories, it ultimately bears no resemblance to whatever first inspired it. I mean, my friend who does Reiki, perfectly normal person, healthy, happy, bears no resemblance at all to Cassie, but unbeknownst to her, she was the spark for the story. I think that is what I like most about writing fiction, is because it's always a gift where it comes from. A conversation that you hear, something that you witness, something perhaps that you experience, as I did with Reiki. I don't know that I could have written the story if I did not have the experience of receiving Reiki treatments, of having that positive experience. I don't know that I would have been able to write a story about a healer. But anyways, that is just a little taste of The Healer, and I hope you will consider maybe wanting to read the entire story, read the rest of the stories in the collection, and if you do, I would love to hear from you and find out what you thought about the story. What did it make you feel? What did it make you think? In any case, thank you so much for being part of today's story time. And we will get together again next week when I will share another short story with you, another excerpt. And hopefully you will enjoy that or find it intriguing or whatever emotion it generates, because everybody has a different experience when they read a story. Thanks again so much, and I look forward to being with you again at our next story time.